Welcome to Finding Certainty with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Laing. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Laing.
Welcome to Finding Certainty. Glad you could join me this morning. I say this every week, but it's my favorite day of the week for lots of reasons. Besides being the end of the week, usually a long and busy week with our work at Certainty Management and the Certainty Collective, I look forward to this call all week long. Take some time to prepare, whether I'm doing an interview or a monologue, but it's kind of like the cherry on top for me, the gravy on the frosting on the cake, let's say. As I interview various professionals and artists and entrepreneurs and others, as we dissect this topic of certainty, I continue to learn new things. I continue to gain additional insights. Even at 55 years old, I continue to learn, right? We're all working through this mortal journey, trying to get better and trying to improve and trying to gain new insights and understanding. My monologue weeks, which I do the first Friday of each week, are a little bit different because it's just me. I'm going to speak for the next hour, share my thoughts and insights and experiences. So it's a little bit different experience, definitely a different preparation process because it takes me a lot longer to get ready for a monologue. An interview, I can show up with zero preparation and just start asking questions. We can have a great conversation. With the monologue, it's a little bit more stressful. It's definitely a little bit more difficult getting ready, but it's also a little bit different of a cathartic experience, I guess, because as I go through these monologues, I constantly am asking myself, how am I doing at this principle? How am I personally doing? Am I teaching it to my kids? Am I doing it well? And sometimes I am. Sometimes I could, in most cases, I could do better. This topic today is no exception. I'm actually proud of the progress I've made over the years when it comes to this topic, and I'll share it with you here in just a moment. But first, I want to give a shout out to my uncle Paul Laing and his wife Jill Laing. I'm actually sitting in their basement as we speak. I'm visiting Utah with my son Evan, and they were kind enough to let us use their guest room and hang out with them for a few days. And so if you're on the YouTube version of this call, you'll see a different background. You won't see my normal painting that I have of George Washington kneeling by his horse. I love that painting because it reminds us of the kind of leaders that founded this nation, the kind of leadership that was founded in principles of accountability, of honor, of integrity, and more. And, this week, as I've been spending some time with my 18-year-old, Evan Laing, I've thought more about those principles. Am I teaching my children principles that can carry them throughout their life? He and I have had a good chance to talk a lot, and it's been great. It was a 6-hour drive from Henderson up here to Utah Valley. And so you start asking yourself those questions. How am I doing? How are my kids doing? Are they doing as well as they could? And am I teaching them as well as I could? It's difficult when you don't see them all the time. My children are 18 to 26. They're growing older. They're leading their own individual lives. But you still ask those questions, and you still want to parent and guide and lead them even when they're far away. So I've been grateful for this opportunity. So what is the topic for today? As you may know, if you follow this show, I do a different monologue the first Friday of every month. I started here in 2024, and I'm going through the alphabet. I started with A is for accountability. Last month I did H is for humility. This month I'm going to be speaking about integrity. I is for integrity. Wednesday evening of this week, I had a unique experience where I was able to take part in a ceremony with a foundation called Quilt of Valor. This is a veteran organization that honors veterans and makes them a homemade quilt personalized to them. And they talk about wrapping. They say when you wrap yourself with this quilt, when you see it, whenever you use it, remember that you are wrapped in the appreciation of a grateful nation. It was a really neat experience. My dad received this. He's a veteran as well, and he received his quilt several months ago, and he ended up nominating me as an additional recipient. My uncle, Lorenz Laing, received one as well. And surprise, surprise, my parents had invited and nominated an old friend of mine who joined the Army together with me when we were 17 years old, if you can imagine. We actually had to have our parents sign off for us to go in and join the Utah Army Reserve, eventually transferred to Army National Guard. But anyway, it was an interesting metaphor for me because this beautiful patchwork or tapestry of colors that made up this quilt reminded me in a very real sense of the monologues that I've been doing all this year and how they weave together, they blend. There's not any one that stands on its own. They are interconnected, interrelated, and as they weave together, they further illustrate and exemplify the topic of certainty. In life, in quilt work, in principles, there is a, as I call it, a tapestry of connections. There are ripple effects. You do one, it affects another. You do another, it affects the next. It goes full circle back to where you started. All of the characteristics touch, affect, and blend with each other, just like the quilts that we received the other night do. This is my objective, of course, with these monologues, to show how they're all interwoven into one incredible melting pot, with each piece shaping, swaying, supporting, and influencing the others, and vice versa, with really no end in sight. Our topic today is really a perfect example of this. It is woven through each of the principles that we have discussed over the last several months. It isn't always present, but it really should be. And when it is, magic happens. Extraordinary things, successes happen, legacies are created. In this radio host's opinion, none of the others can successfully exist without it. Today's monologue is on integrity. I is for integrity. So the plan for today is to run through first a couple of quick definitions of integrity. We're going to talk about a theme that flows through everything to do with this topic. It's consistent. It appears almost without fail when integrity is present. Next, I'd like to talk just a little bit about why it's important. Does it really matter, and why? Next, we're going to unpack each of the monologues that I've done this last 8 months, each characteristic that we've discussed in relation to integrity. We'll close by talking about how we can develop and honor integrity in our own lives, and then we'll summarize, hopefully get it all done in the next 50 minutes. So here are a few definitions of integrity, if I may. First is a little dry, but it is essential. The dictionary definition of integrity refers to adherence to ethical standards. This is integrity. To have integrity is to adhere to ethics, to etiquette, to really stick to standards, right? To moral guidelines, regardless of the pressure to compromise. There's a lot of pressures out there, right? There's a lot of temptations and distractions and other things that encourage us to, at times, bend the truth a little bit, cut corners. Yeah, just a little white lie, right? It's for the greater good. Maybe it's lying to your spouse about the fact that they say, how do I look in these pants? And you think they look terrible, but you say they look great. I mean, that's a little white lie, right? Is that a question of integrity, or is it overcome by the higher desire or goal to build your relationship and build your significant other? That's a whole other question. We won't go there right now. But ultimately, when we talk about ethics, this ethical integrity, a business maintains integrity by following ethical practices, by doing what's right, by under-promising and over-performing, even when it would be profitable to cut corners. My wife, Tesha, is big on ethics, consistency, and etiquette, and I respect those as well. But she's good at reminding me when I could do better, maybe remember etiquette a little bit more, or so forth and so on. So the next definition is moral uprightness. This is the one we most often think of when we think of integrity. It refers to the quality of being honest, having strong moral principles. It's doing the right thing. And here's a very important point, guys. It's doing the right thing even when no one is watching. That might be the true test of integrity, is who are you and what do you do even when nobody knows? A good example was someone who consistently acts according to their values, demonstrating honesty and trustworthiness even when there is no benefit to them, even when no one is watching, and even when the outcome may even have disastrous effects. It may even have a negative outcome for the person in question. That's always the true question of integrity, right? Can I be honest even when it's going to hurt me or damage my reputation or my business? I mean, that's a tough one. The next definition is consistency of actions. Okay, integrity involves aligning actions, words, and values, ensuring consistency across different situations. Take it, for example, a person who behaves the same way in public and private, just as we were saying, even when no one is watching, they are still integrous. They're still honest. They stand by those principles even when there's no personal benefit. So there's several different themes when we talk about integrity, and I've been thinking about this for the last several weeks. Really started drilling down. I mean, there's a lot we could talk about, right? Integrity is a broad subject, but it's also very, very defined, very, very narrow in some respects. And there is this one recurring theme that I believe is present, it's apparent, it's obvious whenever integrity is present. And that theme is consistency. Consistency in different settings, in different situations, even when someone isn't watching, doing the right thing even when it's hard. And being consistent in that effort. Another definition, just in closing for this first section, is structural integrity. Right? We hear about things like wholeness and unity in a structural or conceptual sense. Integrity refers to the state of being whole and undivided. Integrity of a building refers to its structural soundness, right? Meaning it is strong and intact. And I like that definition. And when I read that, that really stood out to me. Strong and intact. Again, there's that consistency theme. You are unbroken. You're not malleable, right? It's not to mean we're inflexible when it comes to being patient with people or when circumstances require it, but being inflexible when it comes to our values and our efforts. Okay, so first, let's talk about why is it important. Warren Buffett famously said, in looking for people to hire, you look for three qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. If they don't have the first, the other two will kill you, he concludes. So Buffett, who is obviously one of the most successful business people, entrepreneurs, business leaders in America, believes that integrity is the foundation upon which all other positive traits are built. And I would agree. There are several benefits to being honest. Okay, I'm going to just touch on those real quick as we move along here. First is trust and credibility. Right? We all want to be trusted. We all want to be respected. Integrity is the cornerstone of trust. Whether in business, personal, relationships, leadership, people are more likely to trust individuals or organizations that consistently act with integrity. There's that word again, consistency. You're going to hear it all the way through today's dialogue. There's a saying I like: it takes years to build a good reputation. It can take seconds to damage it. This is a little scary as a business owner, but it's an important reminder. Trust is built on integrity. It is hard to earn, but easy to lose. And once lost, it can take years to rebuild. It's an important reminder for anyone trying to build a relationship, a business, maybe a political position. Wish we had more integrity in our politics today, and I think many of us would agree. Without integrity, promises lose meaning, and relationships, endeavors, and reputations can crumble. A company that cuts corners in safety standards or misleads customers for short-term gain will eventually face backlash. It could be significant backlash in many cases. You may remember the Volkswagen emissions scandal. The automaker's integrity was compromised when they falsified emission data. This betrayal of trust cost the company billions and severely damaged its reputation. You compare this to Toyota. They had some faulty gas pedals back in 2009, and they recalled millions of vehicles due to these faulty gas pedals. Instead of deflecting blame, they took full responsibility, issued a recall, worked tirelessly to restore customer trust. This demonstrated their commitment to integrity, and they have continued to grow. I've used Toyotas myself for years, not only because of how well they run, how few problems they have, but also because of who they are. Second reason is an ethical compass. Right? Integrity acts as an internal guide that helps us navigate complex situations, especially when the right decision isn't immediately clear, which often happens. We've all had situations where, the decision, the direction wasn't completely clear, and yet that ethical compass, that integrity, helps us make the right decision. It ensures that we stay aligned with our values and ethics, even when no one is watching. In situations where there's no direct oversight, integrity pushes individuals to still do the right thing. For example, returning a lost wallet full of money to its rightful owner. Even when keeping it would be easier, this reflects integrity-driven behavior. Just the other night, I went to the movies with my wife. There was this really nice pair of sunglasses someone left sitting on their seat, and I was tempted for just a moment to take them and keep them. But instead, I took them out and gave them to the ticket taker. Somebody may come back looking for them. They were $300 sunglasses. And for a moment, I was tempted. I was talking with a friend of mine, Andy Tenney, about this topic, asked him for his insights. We were talking about the monologue, and he shared a story of when he was a kid playing basketball. He was on a competitive team, and the coach came to him and asked him, "What do you think of so-and-so, his teammate?" And for just a minute, he was tempted to say, "Well, he's good, but he's not as good as me. And, he tries hard." He was tempted to kind of take him down a notch or two. And yet he didn't. He said, he's a great player. He's as good as me or better. I think he's phenomenal. He's good under pressure. He's a great passer, great shooter. Really complimented this guy, even though he was tempted to maybe have a little bit less integrity and tear him down. Well, the coach came back and said, you're going to be starting, and he's going to be your backup. And he realized, even as a young boy, I think he was 14, 15 years old or so, that this was a test. They were testing his integrity, testing his ability as a leader. Was he a leader? What did he care about? Teamwork? Did he care about his players, his teammates? And he passed that test. And he's always remembered that lesson of consistency in that ethical compass. I love that example. It's not just my friend, as a young kid playing ball in San Diego. I mean, we see examples of this everywhere. There's a study by the Journal of Business Ethics that revealed that teams, college teams, professional teams, etc., with a culture of integrity and ethical behavior see much better long-term performance and cohesion. We see the reverse, for example. Remember the New England Patriots were hit with a pretty big scandal. It's called Deflategate, where they were accused of using underinflated footballs to give themselves an advantage. Whether it was true or not, a lot of people think it was. It's one of the reasons they won so many Super Bowls and so forth. It put a really big tarnish on Tom Brady's name and on the entire team, the entire franchise. That's the last thing we want, right? When athletes, coaches, teams stick to ethical guidelines, respect their opponents, remember sportsmanship, etc., they foster an environment of honesty, even under pressure. In the long run, it serves them well. Not only do they win, but they're respected in the process, and that might even be more important. There's that word about consistency again. Are they consistently integrous? I like this quote a lot. If you're always honest, you never have to remember what you said. Personally, I can't afford to not be honest. My memory gets worse and worse as I get older. I couldn't keep my stories straight if they weren't based in fact. My wife gives me a hard time about it. She actually likes it because she can tell me the same stories multiple times, and I'm always intrigued because I can't remember the last time I heard it. But the next reason for being honest, for having integrity in our lives, is just what I was referring to. It's about long-term success. Ultimately, long-term success that is achieved through integrity tends to be more sustainable because it's based on solid ethical foundations. It also fosters loyalty. Companies known for ethical practices tend to have more loyal customers, employees, and partners. This is just one of the reasons, like I said, that I personally like Toyota so much, besides the fact they run forever. Maybe I should get them to help sponsor my show. I talk a lot about them. Another good example is Costco. They have a really remarkable reputation for treating their employees and their customers fairly. Their employees are paid well. They offer a highly lenient return policy. And this integrity-based approach has fostered strong customer loyalty and helped the company thrive for decades. This applies to individuals in leadership positions. It applies in relationships. People are more inclined to support those who are consistent and trustworthy. We've all known both good and bad examples of this, right? My friend Andy Tenney is one of the best. I remember Nelson Mandela. He was a great example of this. I'll talk more about him in a minute, but the next reason for being integrous, for having integrity in our lives is simple self-respect and peace of mind. Acting with integrity helps individuals maintain their self-respect and sense of worth. There's this inherent satisfaction that comes from knowing you've acted according to your values, even when faced with difficult choices. There's an internal peace that's unmistakable and incomparable. You can sleep well at night. People with strong integrity are less likely to experience regret because they know they made decisions that they can stand by. We've all made the opposite, right? We've all made decisions we regret. At times, we didn't have as much integrity as we should have. And that makes for some hard and sleepless nights. Somebody cheats their way to success. They may achieve external accolades, but they often deal with inner turmoil. Someone who succeeds by staying true to their principles, however, can enjoy their success without feeling guilt or shame. There's something called the Edelman Trust Barometer. That it states that trust in businesses that demonstrate transparency and ethical practices has grown significantly. Companies that are seen as behaving with integrity, especially around issues like employee well-being and social justice, are 5 times more likely to retain their customers and their employees. That's pretty significant. 5 times. Incredible. A lot of integrity starts with being honest with ourselves. We want trust and credibility. We want respect and greater self-control. There's a lot of good examples out there, but it really starts with ourselves. Sometimes we need reminders. My two youngest sons are 18 and 21. Both went and got a tattoo on their left wrist, and it is simply the number 1. Now, I'm not a big fan of tattoos. My one son has several of them. More power to him, but it's not my thing. But I was kind of proud of them for the fact they went and got this number 1 tattooed on their wrist. It's a reminder of a principle I've taught them their entire lives, which is very simply rule number 1. I'd always say, remember rule number 1, don't be stupid. They love it. They want me to get one. I've considered it, but sometimes we need reminders. We need reminders to not be stupid. We need reminders to be honest. We need to be honest with others at times, and sometimes that's hard, right? I have a friend named Truman Rowley, and he's an accomplished certified public accountant. He's a professor at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. It's interesting because he mentioned to me about a month ago that he had listened to one of my shows, had enjoyed it, and I said, "Well, you should listen to my show this morning. I talked about humility. It was really great." Well, he jokingly, I think, mostly, he said, "That's kind of ironic that you're bragging about a show about humility." It hadn't even occurred to me. I just was telling him that it had gone well. I didn't stumble over my words. I was proud of the fact. But in effect, it sounded like I was bragging about this show, this monologue I had done on humility. It taught me an important lesson, though, and one that I think was warranted, especially coming from a credible source like him. See, Truman, besides being a CPA, as I said, he's a professor, and he's a professor he teaches financial statement auditing. He conducts experimental research on audits. His work is focused on designing, implementing, and testing internal control systems. Think about that. It's one reason I think he naturally responded to my unintended braggadocio, because his whole life, his work is focused on internal control systems. And these are what need to exist in our lives, our personal lives, not just in business, in marketing and so forth, but our personal. We need to have internal control systems. If we want to become more integrous in our work, we need these kinds of reminders, these kinds of rules, this number 1 on our wrists, these values that we stick with consistently. That is what I believe is the key or the secret to developing more integrity in our lives. We're up against our first and only break. I'm only doing one these days. But real quick, if you don't go away, come back. I'm going to talk about what was unique about Truman's response to me, what I learned about it, a very important principle that it teaches. And then we're going to go through the 7 or 8 monologues we've done this year, quickly go through them and analyze how integrity applies in each of them. So thanks for listening. Don't go away. We'll be right back. So if you're on the YouTube video, I always say you get a little bit extra, a little bit behind the scenes before and after and during the break. I mentioned being with my son Evan this week, and it's been really a pleasure being able to spend time with him and just drive. And we have 6 hours from Vegas to here and back. There's 12 hours of talk time, not to mention in between all of the appointments and so forth that we're doing. See, he's learning my business. He's trying to understand it. He really wants to buy a new truck. He's kind of a hands-on guy. He's been fighting wildfires in Oregon. He's going to work on a beef cattle ranch in Bend, Oregon, or Prineville, Oregon. He's a really hard worker, and he's a kid who has these principles just ingrained into him. Whether they came from me or his mother or other mentors, he has a pretty good idea of who he is and who he wants to be. And I'm just really blown away by him. It's interesting watching him watch me and us in these meetings. He's kind of been my shadow this week, sitting in on meetings and listening and asking questions, meeting different clients. We've gone to lunch meetings, we've done Zooms, and he's been right at my wing, observing and learning. And as I said earlier in the show, we really hope that our children and our employees, our staff, anyone that we're mentoring, maybe coaching, we hope they're learning from us the right kinds of principles like integrity, like accountability, like composure, all the principles that we've talked about over the last 8 months, right? These principles that create certainty in our lives and certainty in the lives of those around us. And, it's a lot. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to focus on. They're hard questions. How are we doing? How can we do better? I think one of the most important things we can do is ask those questions and continue to find answers and continue to get better. So we're coming back from break here. Thanks for hanging with me here if you're on the YouTube video.
You are listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Laing. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Thanks for listening in today. If you're a new listener, I appreciate you stopping by. If you're a recurring fan, I appreciate your patronage. Before the break, I was talking about some feedback a friend of mine gave. I think it was partly joking, but also sending a message, and I appreciated it. And what I appreciated about it was he wasn't critical. He was actually really kind. First, he complimented me. That's a good old Dale Carnegie principle. He complimented a show that I did. I mentioned my show on humility, and then he kind of tongue-in-cheek said, it's kind of funny you're bragging about your humility monologue, which I guess I was. I didn't mean to be. But anyway, it illustrates an important principle in integrity. When we are trying to be honest with someone, giving them feedback, it does us no good to not do it with kindness, with encouragement, with positive uplift and support, right? People will shut down. They're not going to listen to us, even if we have something they really need to hear, if we don't start with that. Dale Carnegie talks about don't kick over the beehive if you want to get honey out of it. And it's a great reminder, I believe, when it comes to integrity. The scriptures tell us a soft answer turneth away wrath. This applies in feedback, I believe, and so forth. Another lesson I remember hearing years and years ago, that if someone was talking about someone else, one of the most integrous things we can do, the most honest examples we can give, is to say to them, rather than gossiping about that person behind their back, but to say to them, you should go talk to them about that. If that's how you feel, you should tell them. If you do that with them, they're going to assume you're doing it about them when you're not present, when they're not with you. And that's what we should be doing, right? Gossip is a terrible habit. It is a lack of integrity. It's damaging to relationships. A lot of people do it. It's a habit for a lot of us. But one of the honest or integrous things we can do is to say exactly that. You should go talk to them and then leave the conversation. Okay, so let's jump into these monologues. This hour goes by really quickly. And I want to talk about the characteristics of certainty. How does integrity weave with and into and help confirm these principles? We got to go pretty fast to cover them all. Back in January, I talked about accountability. I shared the book that I contributed to. I wrote a chapter about accountability for a book called Mission Matters. What is accountability? What does it have to do with integrity? Well, I think that's pretty easy. Accountability is the acknowledgement and assumption of responsibility for one's actions. Integrity underpins accountability. by ensuring individuals or organizations own up to their mistakes and successes. When people act with integrity, they're more likely to admit when they fall short, make amends, and learn from their mistakes. It is key to becoming a greater business owner, leader, husband, wife, child. It's key to everything. Tylenol was actually a good example of this back in 1982. You may remember their crisis. It was one of the best corporate examples of integrity, I believe, after discovering that several bottles of Tylenol were tampered with and laced with cyanide, resulting in the deaths of 7 people. Johnson & Johnson immediately recalled over 31 million bottles, despite the financial loss. They didn't point fingers. They didn't try to pass the buck. They acted swiftly, not just to preserve their brand, prioritizing lives over profit. They did it also for safety. This decision, which was grounded in integrity, helped restore trust in their brand. To this day, Tylenol is considered a stunning moneymaker. Wall Street analysts estimate Johnson & Johnson's revenue for Tylenol at over $1.3 billion a year. Not bad for a product that has actually inadvertently killed people. It says a lot about how powerful integrity is for a company. True accountability means owning one's mistakes, and the second half is learning from them. Integrity in accountability builds trust and loyalty, even in difficult times. And leaders who understand this, they stand out. They attract people to them. They stay relevant. Some of them even change history. In February, my birthday month, I talked about B is for balance. That's an area I struggle with sometimes, but it's also an area where integrity has to reign supreme. Balance requires fairness, and fairness stems from integrity. Whether balancing work and personal life or balancing priorities and decision-making, a person with integrity will ensure that all areas are treated with equity and respect. They will not sacrifice their core values or integrity for short-term gain or even convenience. This is a hard one for a lot of us, but think about it. What did you promise your employer when you went to work for them? You promised you'd work hard. What did you promise your spouse or significant other when you married them or entered a relationship with them? Well, you promised love, loyalty, life. What did you promise your kids when you had them? Maybe you didn't say it out loud, but you promised them time, attention, mentorship. Even if you didn't verbalize it, these things were understood. You promised them balance. And are you keeping that promise? Consistency, again, in relationships, parenting, impact, and work. It is essential, and it is founded in integrity. Oprah Winfrey is a great example of this. Balance is vital in the life of many successful people. She's a great example of this. She has consistently balanced her massive influence and success with a focus on giving back. Her philanthropic efforts, such as founding the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls, reflect a commitment to balancing success with social responsibility, guided by integrity. The moral of the story: integrity ensures a balance between personal success and the greater good. It contributes to success in our relationships and long-term trust and gratitude. And most importantly, it prevents success from becoming selfish or exploitive. It helps contribute to long-lasting relationships and, honestly, joy. Moving on, let's get to March. In March, I talked about composure. Composure refers to the state of being calm, in control, mentally collected, especially in challenging or stressful situations. It involves maintaining poise, self-control, and emotional stability regardless of external circumstances. For example, even though the meeting was tense, she maintained her composure and handled the situation with grace. In essence, composure is the ability to stay calm under pressure. Integrity helps maintain composure under stress And it usually stems from or is an outgrowth of having a clear ethical foundation. It provides all of us with inner confidence and stability, even in chaotic situations, as I said. It comes from knowing that our decisions and actions are aligned with, there's that theme again, right? They're consistent with our personal and our organizational values. Good example of this is from Serena Williams, 2018 US Open. There was a heated moment where she faced a controversial call. Though visibly upset, her ability to maintain composure while still being assertive allowed her to express her displeasure without resorting to unethical behavior. Obviously, she's a superstar. Her integrity in staying true to her values while under immense pressure showcases that composure is a direct result of having a strong moral foundation. There's a lot of examples of this. Another was Jackie Robinson. He became the first black athlete to play in Major League Baseball. He faced intense racism and hostility, and yet he showed extraordinary integrity by staying composed under enormous pressure and refusing to retaliate against those who attacked him. This integrity not only broke barriers in sports, but also inspired social change. He is lauded as an extraordinary example of this, and we all learn from him. We've all learned from his example. In short, integrity provides the inner strength to remain composed under pressure, ensuring that our actions align with our values. One of the hardest topics for me to talk about was discipline. Back in April, D is for discipline. It was hard because it's hard to define. We know it's important, and I think we all struggle with it at times. Sometimes we're good at it, sometimes we're not. But it is so key, and integrity is interlaced throughout it. We know discipline is consistency in action, and integrity ensures that those actions, again, just like composure, are in line with one's values and principles. Whether it's personal discipline, like staying committed to a fitness goal, or professional discipline, like adhering to company policies, integrity ensures that actions are not swayed by momentary temptations or external pressures. In other words, that they stay consistent. There was a retired Navy SEAL officer named Jocko Willink. He was lieutenant commander with several of the SEAL teams, ending with SEAL Team 3. And in his book, Extreme Ownership, he talks about the principle, discipline equals freedom. I love that saying. That's so powerful. In effect, this principle reflects the idea that disciplined behavior rooted in integrity allows individuals to achieve goals while staying true to their core principles. Consistent discipline, behavior, principles, and results. Consistency and focus. One of the most important words in life is the word remember. Remembering who we are, what we stand for, where we're headed, what our values are, and what we want out of life. A really great corporate example, obviously this is a business show, so I'm trying to share examples, but a really great example is Patagonia's commitment to the environment. The outdoor clothing brand, Patagonia, has consistently acted with integrity in its commitment to environmental sustainability. They've encouraged customers to buy fewer products. They even offer repair services to extend the life of their items. I mean, unheard of in a manufacturer, right? Patagonia's founder, Jean Chouinard, even transferred ownership of the company to a trust, ensuring that profits are used to combat climate change. Discipline requires integrity to stay committed, especially to long-term goals, based on one's values, even when temptations or shortcuts arise. It's about being honest with oneself about what's important, ethical, and right, and sticking with it no matter the cost or criticism. I mentioned Nelson Mandela earlier. After being in prison for 27 years, Mandela emerged without bitterness and led South Africa toward reconciliation rather than revenge. His integrity in holding true to his principles of equality and justice, even at great personal cost, set a global example for leadership and moral fortitude. In May, I talked about endurance. E is for endurance. I considered talking about emotional intelligence instead because it's a hot topic. It also requires integrity, and it also interweaves with so many of these principles. But I went with endurance. And endurance isn't just about pushing through challenges. It's about staying true to one's values throughout the journey, no matter how difficult. You hear this theme recurring, right? Staying true to your values, being consistent, being rooted to those values. Integrity gives people the strength to endure hardship without compromising their principles. It's easy to cut corners when things get tough, but endurance combined with integrity ensures the journey is meaningful and ethically sound. Think about that. One of the best examples I've seen is from the movie The Soul Surfer, a story about Bethany Hamilton. She's an American professional surfer who became widely known for her resilience and her courage after surviving a shark attack back in 2003. At the age of 13, while surfing off the coast of Kauai, Hawaii, she was attacked by a tiger shark and lost her left arm. Despite this life-changing event, Bethany showed incredible determination and returned to competitive surfing just months after the attack. Her story became an inspiration worldwide, highlighting themes of perseverance, of faith, and overcoming adversity. She actually went on to become a successful professional surfer with one arm, winning numerous competitions, sharing her journey through her autobiography, Soul Surfer. A true story of family, faith, and fighting to get back on the board. And her story, as I said, was later made into the popular film, The Soul Surfer, in 2011. You hear that title of her book, Fighting to Get Back on the Board. It is a fight to maintain integrity, to be rooted in our principles. It is not easy. Beyond surfing, Bethany's gone on to be a motivational speaker, an advocate. She uses her platform to inspire others facing challenges, especially those with physical disabilities. Despite the physical and emotional challenges, she never compromised her values or her passion for surfing. She returned to the sport and became an inspiration to millions. Endurance, coupled with integrity, means staying the course, regardless of adversity, without sacrificing one's principles. In June, I talked about faith. I've got to keep going. We're going to run out of time here. Faith, whether in a higher power, a process, or a team, requires trust. And integrity, as we've said, is the foundation of trust. Without integrity, faith becomes fragile and unreliable. It's simple. People are more likely to trust and have faith in individuals and systems that consistently demonstrate honesty and transparency. There's a lot of great examples, one of which is one of the best books on business I've ever read. It's called Good to Great by Jim Collins. I won't share the example now, but I encourage you to go look it up. It discusses what's called the Stockdale Paradox, named after Admiral Jim Stockdale, who survived years of imprisonment during World War II. During the Vietnam War. I do want to share this example. We've all heard of Nelson Mandela, but many may be less familiar with Desmond Tutu. His is a powerful example of how integrity and faith go together. He was a South African Anglican bishop and social rights activist. He was a prominent leader in the fight against apartheid. Tutu's faith as a Christian deeply informed his sense of justice, equality, and moral responsibility. Throughout his life, he maintained an unwavering commitment to nonviolence, human dignity, reconciliation, even in the face of severe oppression and danger. His faith gave him the courage to speak out against injustices, while his integrity ensured that he stayed true to his beliefs, regardless of the consequences. When apartheid ended, Tutu was appointed chair of South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Phenomenal title, right? He worked tirelessly to help the company heal by encouraging open discussions about human rights abuses. Despite the immense pressure to seek revenge or punish those responsible for the atrocities of apartheid, Tutu remained steadfast in his message of forgiveness, rooted in both his faith and his integrity. Tutu's integrity in advocating for peaceful solutions, along with his faith-driven belief in the power of forgiveness, not only earned him international respect, but also helped guide South Africa through one of its most difficult transitions. His commitment to both integrity and faith allowed him to lead with moral clarity and conviction, making a lasting impact not only on Africa, but on the world. Integrity is essential for maintaining faith, even when outcomes are uncertain. Trust in oneself, in others, in a higher power is rooted in honesty. I love that. In July, I talked about G is forgiving. It's one of my favorite monologues I've given. I've seen many good examples in my life, examples that prove true generosity stems from a place of integrity. Giving with integrity means doing so without expecting anything in return and being transparent about one's motives. It's the difference between giving to boost one's reputation and giving out of genuine care and a desire to help others. One of the best examples of that is Warren Buffett and his giving pledge. He is renowned for pledging to give away more than 99% of his wealth, encouraging other billionaires to do the same. His integrity in ensuring that his wealth would benefit humanity reflects the idea of giving selflessly for the greater good. We've all heard of Warren Buffett. You may not have heard of Chuck Feeney. His is a great example of how giving and integrity are connected. He was the billionaire who gave away nearly all of his fortune in secret. Chuck Feeney is the co-founder of the Duty-Free Shoppers Group. You see those duty-free stores in all the airports you go to. He amassed billions through his business. However, instead of keeping or flaunting his wealth, he made it his mission to give away his fortune during his lifetime. Over several decades, Feeney donated more than $8 billion to causes like education, public health, human rights, and scientific research, all while maintaining a modest lifestyle. He lived in a small apartment, wore a simple watch, and traveled in economy class, if you can imagine. What's extraordinary about Feeney's giving is that he did it with integrity by choosing to give anonymously for many years. He didn't seek recognition or accolades. He ensured that his philanthropy was not about helping others, was about helping others, not about personal gain or reputation. His giving was driven by genuine care for the causes he supported and a commitment to making a difference without seeking attention. His efforts inspired the creation of the Giving While Living movement, encouraging other wealthy individuals like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett to follow his example. In August, I talked about humility. Heard a great quote: "Humility is the purest form of honesty." I shared the story of Truman Rowley. Humility and integrity are closely linked. A humble person understands their strengths and weaknesses and is honest about both. Integrity ensures that this honesty is reflected in our behavior, allowing us to accept feedback, admit faults, and acknowledge others' contributions, being willing to be wrong, to learn, to grow, to not necessarily know everything and have all the answers. These are all keys of integrity and keys of a good leader. I mentioned the bad example of the Patriots. Here's a good one. Keanu Reeves has become a model of humility and generosity in Hollywood, known for giving away significant portions of his salary to crew members, quietly supporting charities. Despite his fame, he continues to live simply, avoiding the trappings of Hollywood excess, proving that integrity and humility can exist with success. Another favorite example of mine is Fred Rogers. He was of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood fame. Despite his fame, Mr. Rogers remained grounded and focused on making a positive impact on children's lives. His quiet, genuine approach to life and work, rooted in humility and integrity, made him a much beloved public figure for many, many years. Are we seeing a theme yet? Grounded, focused, rooted. There are different forms of consistency. But how do we develop and even honor integrity in our lives? We develop self-awareness. We commit to long-term thinking. We surround ourselves with integrity, with people who have integrity. We learn from them and seek to be like them. We create systems for accountability, reminders like my son's tattoo on his wrist. We embrace humility and openness. We are honest when we fall short, and we practice courage. Integrity often requires courage, especially when the consequences are uncomfortable or risky. We cultivate courage through small everyday actions, which builds resilience and the necessary fortitude to make the right choice when the stakes are high. Warren Buffett and Chuck Feeney didn't just one day become generous, giving while living philanthropists. They developed these characteristics over years. Same as my friend Andy. I'll close with this. We're out of time, but Abe Lincoln is known as Honest Abe. He actually dropped a client in a very famous public case because it came to him that after reviewing the case, that his client had in fact engaged in some dishonest practices, and he dropped him. He risked a great deal of public scrutiny and criticism, but instead, this act of integrity earned him widespread respect. His honesty became a defining feature of his personal brand, which led to him being known as Honest Abe. It helped him a great deal in his political career, and we remember him to this day. I'm out of time, guys, but remember these reminders, remember these examples. Remember that certainty is out there. Integrity is a big part of it. You can find it, and we can help. I wish you the very best. Have a great weekend, and thanks for listening. I'll talk to you later. Thank you for your help. You too. So if you're on the YouTube video, you always get a little bit extra. Let me just summarize. We ran out of time there at the end. A lot to cover in this topic. I wanted to share examples, not just from my life, but from business and sports and so forth. But these are the morals of the story. One, integrity is a foundation. It's the foundation upon which, in my opinion, all other virtues and characteristics are built. Without it, even the most impressive attributes can falter when tested or be hollow at best. Trust and transparency is a critical piece of integrity. Integrity fosters trust, whether in public life, business, sports, or personal relationships. It's the consistent application of honesty and transparency that builds strong, lasting connections. Next reminder is resilience in hardship. Integrity doesn't mean avoiding mistakes or difficulties, but facing them head on, owning them, striving to improve. This resilience strengthens both individuals and organizations. It leads to longevity of success. Success built on integrity tends to be more sustainable and respected. Cutting corners or acting dishonestly might lead to short-term gains, but long-term success requires a moral foundation. We inspire others. When leaders, athletes, or public figures, or even parents act with integrity, they inspire others, including their children, to do the same. Integrity has a ripple effect that positively impacts entire communities, organizations, and even nations. When you integrate integrity into each characteristic, you strengthen it and create a more reliable foundation for building a life of certainty. I love that. When people demonstrate the principles we've talked about today, accountability, balance, composure, discipline, endurance, faith, giving, and humility. Coupled with integrity, it builds trust. It creates long-lasting, meaningful success and relationships, and ultimately peace of mind. In the end, integrity isn't about perfection, but about striving to do the right thing consistently and authentically. It's another word I love, authenticity. The guiding principle of integrity helps us navigate uncertainty, challenges, and even success with grace. It helps make sure we're grounded, focused, and rooted in the values that matter most to us and to others. It's a recipe, undoubtedly, for greater certainty in all that we do. It's also a recipe for a good night's rest, and that I can get behind. Again, I appreciate you listening. I hope this was helpful for you. Please like, share, and comment, or you see us post the show. It's on YouTube. It's also, once the live show is completed, it's also uploaded to Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, etc., etc. If you'll go and listen to those, like them, share them, and comment on them, really helps us get the word out. And I think there's a lot of people who could benefit from this Finding Certainty show. So again, I appreciate your patronage. Thanks for staying with me for a whole hour, just me. I think the ones with the guests are probably more interesting, but I appreciate you bearing with me and listening to these thoughts and insights. I do believe they can bless your life. I believe they can create more certainty in your life, and I pray that they can. Thanks so much. Have a great week. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next Friday. Take care of yourself. Talk to you later. Bye for now.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Finding Certainty. We hope you've gained some more insight into how to create more certainty in your own business or nonprofit. Join us next week for another taste of the Certainty Experience. Until then, we wish you greater certainty in all that you do.